Good afternoon, and welcome to the Peace Corps. You know, about a year and a half ago, I was in my confirmation hearing, and I commented to the chairman then of the committee, Senator Chris Dodd, who of course is a proud returned Peace Corps volunteer, right? Who I had the great pleasure of serving with in the Dominican Republic. He was in the northern part of the country, and I was in the southern part of the country, and a great advocate for Peace Corps, and we miss him deeply in the Senate. But I commented at my confirmation hearing that one of the things that I thought was going to be really wonderful about being the director of the Peace Corps, if confirmed by the Senate, was that I was going to be here during the 50th anniversary. And I thought what was important about the 50th anniversary was that not just for us to congratulate ourselves for serving in the Peace Corps and serving with wonderful people such as the nation of Slovakia, but also to allow Americans to re-engage with the Peace Corps and to celebrate this unique, amazing American success story that has meant so much to millions of people around the world and has meant so much to the people who have served in the Peace Corps. And so I'm so delighted that today we have another example of this wonderful partnership between our two great nations. And I want to thank all of you for being here today because this is important to us, and I can't think of a better way to celebrate our 50th anniversary. So we're delighted, of course, to have distinguished members of the diplomatic community join us today, both as panelists and as audience members. Let me welcome the Ambassador of Slovakia, Peter Burian. The Ambassador of Azerbaijan, Yasser Aliyev. Is he here? Yes, Mr. Ambassador? Okay. Very good. The Ambassador of Bulgaria, Elena Poptodorova. Okay, very good. And of course, we have the U.S. Ambassador of Slovakia, Mr. Sedgwick. Welcome, sir. In addition, we were honored to have two former ambassadors today. I'm not sure if, I don't think he is here today, Ambassador William Lures.
No, he isn't.
Mm-hmm. He is engaged in another activity, important foreign policy symposium. Ambassador Ted Russell, who I was delighted to learn was there at the beginning of the Peace Corps program in your wonderful nation. Our Deputy Director, Carrie Hessler-Radlett, will be formally introducing our panelists, but I would also like to personally welcome a few other people. And let me also comment, is Stacy Rhodes here? Stacy Rhodes, our Chief of Staff. One distinguishing feature about the three of us is that I think for the first time in the history of the Peace Corps, we have three returned Peace Corps volunteers in these three positions. And so we're delighted to be here during the 50th anniversary. Let me also welcome Dr. Tomaika Tillman, right here. Welcome, sir. Philip Vagas. Roger Potaki. Wendy Lures. Michael Hogledner. Michael. Igor Namovsky, sir, who served in the Peace Corps in Slovakia. Linka Sirovchek, from the embassy. We also welcome other members of the Slovak Embassy, Friends of Slovakia, guest and Peace Corps staff. You know, let me also mention something else. There are many affiliate groups that represent volunteers who served in countries around the world, in 139 countries where we've served over the past 50 years, and I can't tell you how much we appreciate and support all the work that they do. It's important for us and allows us to remain in contact with the countries in a special way. And of course, as you know, I'm sure the Friends of Slovakia know this so well, what better ambassadors in America than people who have actually worked and served in the countries where we've been engaged? Very, very important to us. Well, as you know, 2011 marks our 50th anniversary, the founding of the Peace Corps. It's been a long time since that day on the steps of the University of Michigan when then Senator Kennedy issued that challenge to the students that night. He says, how many of you who plan to study medicine are willing to spend a couple of years in Ghana? And sure enough, 10 months later, the Peace Corps opened up an office in Ghana. I don't think we could do that today. I don't think if I made an announcement today that 10 months later we'd have a new operation somewhere in the world, right? I just suspect that might be the case. But it was a great start. And I was in Ghana in October of last year, and I met with leaders of government and business and civil society, and every one of those leaders, every man and woman I met with had a positive experience with the Peace Corps volunteer during that time. And I know you have many stories like that in this wonderful nation of Slovakia, so we're delighted to be here today. The anniversary, of course, offers us an opportunity not only to celebrate the cooperation between the United States and its partner countries, but also to reflect on the impact that this partnership has made on both the United States and our counterparts. You know, we have a so-called third goal of the Peace Corps, and the third goal is to bring back the rich experience that you've had as a Peace Corps volunteer and to come back to our nation and to make a difference in our nation. If you look at every walk of life, in every sector in our society, education, health, the political world, we now have 4 returned Peace Corps volunteers on Capitol Hill in the Congress. Americans who've served in the Peace Corps making a difference in our society, really moving forward and achieving our third goal. So it's in this spirit that the Peace Corps, the Embassy of Slovakia, Friends of Slovakia, are cooperating to explore and celebrate our 2 countries' commitments to the promotion of civic engagement and volunteerism. So I'm delighted to be here with you today. I'm to open up this wonderful dialogue. I'm now going to turn over to my esteemed colleague, Carrie Hessler-Radlett. Thank you very much. Carrie? You probably want to come the other way. That's right, yeah.
Thank you.
Sure.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's really a pleasure to be here with all of you. And I, too, will talk about my confirmation hearing because I had the honor of sharing my hearing panel and I guess confirmation date with Ambassador Ted Sedgwick. So I feel really a very strong connection to the people of Slovakia through our representative there. Also, I've been working for the last 6 months or so with the organizing committee, and so it's been really my privilege to get to know the ambassador and members of your staff and many others of you from the Friends of Slovakia. So it's really a delight to be able to celebrate today with you. Today we have a fantastic set of panelists to explore and celebrate the commitments of the United States and the Slavic Republic in promoting civic engagement not only in Slovakia, but also in other countries as well. And this is, I think, a really pivotal time in history as we look at the Arab Spring and transitions in democracy in other countries. And I know that many of you are also engaged in that movement as well in one way or another in applying lessons learned from Slovakia. So I think that's going to be something that we can talk about today. Panel 1 will focus on the birth of democracy, civil society, and volunteerism in Slovakia. Panelists will explore Slovakia's progress from a donor recipient to a contributor of assistance to other countries, with an emphasis on the role of volunteerism in fostering democracy and human rights. Our second panel will explore the role of Peace Corps volunteers and their engagement with their Slavic partners. Returned volunteers and Slavic counterparts will reflect on their cooperative work experience, supporting the development of civil society within Slovakia and internationally. I'd like to, before I start, thank the members of the organizing committee who put in countless hours to make this happen. Really, it's been a huge effort. There are many people who work behind the scenes, and there are too many to really call it by name, but I would like to thank 3 people in particular, and I'd like them to stand so we can recognize them. First is Katarina Kovachova, who is the Deputy Chief of Mission at the Embassy of Slovakia. Katarina? Second, Ambassador Ted Russell, who you met just briefly before, who served as the first U.S. ambassador to the Slavic Republic and who is active in the Friends of Slovakia group. And then Julius Kasovic, who worked with Peace Corps for over 14 years and served as the program manager with Peace Corps in Slovakia for 6 years. He is of Slavic descent himself, so going back to Slovakia was really going home for him. So, Julius. And then again, I want to thank the Friends of Slovakia who have done so much to organize it. And their president, Joe Senko, is here today, so I'd like to recognize him as well on behalf of your entire group. So the format today is a Oprah-style format. I'd like to ask the members of our first panel to come to stage. I'd like to start with Tamaika Tilleman. You can come along here and then come right up here. Philip Vagac, Roger Pataki, and Wendy Lures. So our first panel explores the issue of democracy, civil society, and volunteerism in Slovakia. Our panelists will help us explore Slovakia's progress from a recipient of donor assistance in building a civil society to a donor of assistance to other countries. Our discussion today will emphasize the role of volunteerism in fostering democracy and human rights. Our first panelist is Dr. Tamaika Tilleman. He serves as a senior advisor to the Secretary of State for Civil Society and Emerging Democracies. Dr. Tilleman also serves as a speechwriter to Secretary Clinton and assists the Secretary in framing and articulating the policies of the United States for a global audience. Dr. Tilleman previously worked for the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, where he was the principal policy advisor on European and Eurasian affairs to then-Chairman Joseph Biden. Dr. Tilleman's other professional experience includes working with the House Subcommittee on International Organizations, Security, and Human Rights, the White House Office of Media Affairs, and numerous U.S. Senate and congressional campaigns. Dr. Tilleman earned his BA magna cum laude from Yale University and holds a PhD from Johns Hopkins University. Today, Dr. Tilleman will describe U.S. policy initiatives supporting civil society and democratic transformation and how the U.S. and Slovakia can continue to cooperate in advancing civil society and democracy around the world. So I'm going to introduce each panelist as they speak. So first we'll hear from Dr. Tilleman, and then I'll come back up and introduce our next panelist.
Thank you very much. Well, I'll just say a few words, and I have to start by saying that when you work with Secretary Clinton, one of the great pleasures of being part of her team is you hear some of her great stories that she has acquired from her travels and service around the world. And one that always sticks in my mind was something that came out of a visit she made to Nepal, where among others who she met with at the embassy there were Peace Corps volunteers. And this is very common whenever we travel around the world. Whenever possible, if it's logistically feasible, Peace Corps volunteers will come to the embassy for a few minutes with the secretary. And in this case, we had a very good crop of Peace Corps volunteers who came out to see her. And they were all wearing T-shirts, which was a little bit unusual. And what was more unusual was that the T-shirts listed all of the diseases that they had survived in the course of their service to Nepal, in Nepal. And this is perhaps a humorous point, and she loved it, but it illustrates a broader goal, which I want to speak about a little bit in my comments today, which is the Peace Corps does something extraordinary in that it engages in diplomacy at the grassroots level. And we, frankly, I think at the State Department have been a little bit slow coming to this point. But we're very fortunate that the Peace Corps has been way ahead of the curve, and for 50 years they've been engaged in this effort. We had, over the last couple of years, since Secretary Clinton came to the State Department, a massive effort that finally culminated last December that was a top-to-bottom review of everything we do, every program, every bureau, called the Quadrennial Diplomacy and Development Review, which has to rank as one of the most cumbersome titles in the history of Washington, which is a city with plenty of cumbersome titles, and so we tend to shorten that to the QDDR. But one of the key findings of this QDDR process is that we need to do more to engage partners beyond states. We need to reach out beyond governments, because historically we have focused our diplomacy on other countries and other governments. And that's fine and that's important, and we think there's a real need for that. And what we have usually ended up with as a result of that process, which again serves a very important purpose in our international relations, is situations where we have the United States sitting on one side of a table and another country sitting on another side of the table, and we have a conversation about whatever problem it is that we're trying to solve. And again, those discussions are vital, they're valuable. We're not saying that they should go away in any form, but we also recognize that the time has come that we need to build a new table, and we need to come up with a new mechanism for engaging a broader range of partners. And a critical element of that is the type of grassroots diplomacy that we are celebrating in this 50th anniversary year here at the Peace Corps. I wanted to speak a little bit about a few initiatives that we are utilizing to help us in this effort and that we hope can create the architecture for successful cooperation with civil society going forward. And as I do that, I want to give as a backdrop one more story from Secretary Clinton, which is that the first time I ever sat down with her to talk about her civil society agenda and what she hoped to accomplish on these issues, the first country that she mentioned in that conversation was Slovakia. And she had played a very important role in Slovakia, at least I think it's a very important role. She would say it was a very minor role, in encouraging what was a vital transition that took place in that nation at a very different time when there was some leadership that was not nearly as hospitable to civil society and the pluralism that it entails as Slovakia's current leadership. And she went to Bratislava, and before meeting with the head of the government at the time, a man named Vladimir Mečiar, she started by sitting down with civil society organizations. And she had a very good conversation about the challenges confronting Slovakia, the changes that needed to be made in order to complete a successful transition to democracy, and gained a deep appreciation for the value of the work that these individuals were doing on the ground. She then went and sat down with Vladimir Mečiar, who at the time was doing everything in his power to restrict the space in which these organizations could operate. And she says that she's only had 2 meetings throughout her time in public life where her interlocutor really behaved in an inappropriate fashion. But that was one of them, and that by the end of their conversation, he was almost on top of the little cushion where she was sitting on the sofa with him, clenching his fists in anger because he was so furious about the tough message that she delivered about the need to protect civil society and empower them in their efforts. And it is from that backdrop that she realized that we have a tremendous amount of important work to do in countries around the world. Because ultimately, civil society, while it's very diverse and certainly multifaceted, by and large shares the goals that we have to create nations in which there are a multiplicity of voices, in which ideas can flourish, in which people can come together around common goals and common values to advance the common good. And she recognizes that Slovakia is a case study in how that can happen. And so on our side, we're doing a couple of things to support this work. First, we've launched a new initiative called the Strategic Dialogue with Civil Society. And a strategic dialogue is something that we've historically used at the State Department to engage another government, where we have a broad range of strategic interests and we need sustained high-level conversations at the highest levels of our foreign policy apparatus. And we recognized in the aftermath of the QDDR process that while we have good architecture for engaging other governments and we can make a lot of progress using these mechanisms, we needed something new to engage civil society. And so in February, for the very first time, we launched one of these dialogues with a partner other than a government, with global civil society. We brought representatives from civil society from 30 countries to the State Department in Washington, and we had 55 of our embassies participate via video conference. And a number of our embassies, including our embassy in Slovakia under Ambassador Sedgwick's leadership, have since held follow-up sessions to continue this conversation. We've created working groups led by some of our most senior officials at the department that are focused on developing concrete initiatives and deliverables that we will produce over the course of the next 18 months. And we're seeing some great things come about as a result of this. One of the other items that I want to highlight is our work through multilateral organizations that give a place to civil society. And in this regard, we have re-engaged very intensively in the community of democracies, which is one of the only multilateral organizations where civil society is hardwired into the structure of the organization. And we are using the community of democracies as a platform to facilitate our cooperation in transitional democracies in countries like Tunisia and Moldova, where we recognize the need for governments that have been through transitions to come together with civil society organizations pool their expertise and do what we can to be supportive of nations that are trying their best now to follow in the footsteps of countries like Slovakia as they try to develop their own forms of democracy. So these are a couple of examples. Frankly, we could talk for a long time, and I expect we will. But I wanted to give those as some foundational elements of our efforts along these lines. And again, we think that the Peace Corps plays a critical role in this. While it's a very independent entity, it is on the ground building the relationships between our societies that in the long term are the single most important strategic partnership that we have. Governments come and go, but the relationships between our peoples endure. And that's the work that the Peace Corps does, and the trust that is generated as a result of that provides the cornerstone for our partnership, for a successful partnership with every country in the world. So we are very grateful for the Peace Corps' efforts in that regard, and I look forward to our discussion today.
Thank you so much. Fantastic. So since you mentioned the T-shirts with all the diseases, I will tell you one piece of information about Time magazine. Time magazine in 1961 described Peace Corps volunteers in this way. He said that they're adventurous and patriotic, with the patience of Job, the perseverance of a saint, and the digestive system of an ostrich. So I think that you can see that that hasn't changed throughout the 50 years. Okay, our second panelist is Filip Vagac. Mr. Vagac assumed the position of plenipotentiary of the government of Slovakia for civil society beginning in 2011, so it's a relatively new position. However, his long career in business, politics, and civic engagement started before and during the Velvet Revolution in Czechoslovakia. While a student of geophysics, he became one of the foremost student leaders in an anti-regime student movement. Following the revolution, he gave up geophysics in order to pursue a career in public service. Mr. Vagac was elected chairman of the Youth Council of Slovakia, where he served a full term as CEO for 3 years. Subsequently, during a 2-year fellowship in the United States, he studied nonprofit sector management, gaining skills and experiences that he applied to launching the Children of Slovakia Foundation. After successfully launching and stabilizing the Children of Slovakia Foundation, Mr. Vagac was eager to expand his horizons. This led him to diplomacy and service at the Embassy of the Slovak Republic in Washington, D.C. There he sought to deepen his understanding of the business sector and served as CEO in a consulting firm specializing in working with the European Union. After this experience, Mr. Vagac returned to civil society, working for Ashoka, where he was responsible for overseeing Ashoka's portfolio in Eastern and Central Europe and Baltic regions. Later, he worked as a private consultant to several NGOs and businesses. In 2011, the Prime Minister of Slovakia, Ms. Radičová, asked Mr. Vagac to serve as her senior advisor and plenipotentiary of the government of Slovakia for civil society. So today, Mr. Vagac will outline Slovakia's transition from recipient to donor in building civil society and how it currently contributes to democratic transformation in other countries. He will explore the role of Peace Corps and the importance of NGOs, both Slavic and international, in maintaining and building democracies. So, Mr. Vagac?
Thank you very much. As I am the only Slovak in the panel.
You have a big responsibility.
Yes, I have to speak about many issues, and since we got only 5 minutes, I will be very brief. I will try to do my best. First thing what I would like to say is that the Peace Corps is a great organization. I can say that. Nobody else can say that in these terms, because I experienced that in Slovakia when right after the revolution has happened, when people came in and literally, other people were asking, why they are coming, what is the reason behind it. They're just coming just for free and just staying with us for a year or two. It was completely new concept. People were kind of wondering what is behind it, why they are doing it. And slowly they started to kind of believe that this is a really literally voluntary decision by those people who really want to help. And that was bringing a new culture to what we experienced before. That kind of a spirit was not there. And this is why I'm kind of feeling so strongly about going somewhere else and trying to help other people, I think this is a decision by each individual which is very strong and which can set an example that can be really followed by many others. I want to share with you an experience that a week ago I was in Egypt. And I saw and felt almost the same feelings which I experienced when the violent revolution in Slovakia and Czechoslovakia happened. You know, you see the eyes, people really excited, people kind of happy about the change, and felt like, yes, we want to do it. The excitement is high, the expectations are high. And you saw also the other picture in the discussion that we had in the room, that people had many questions. They kind of felt like in which direction we should go, what we should do. And it kind of felt also, you know, in the discussion between them, this is kind of messy, you know, we don't know exactly what to do, how to find the right answers. And that was something what, you know, the democracy is bringing with it. You know, it is sometimes messy. And to get used to it, that takes some time. And it was clear in the room that it would need a lot of discussions and patience to really come up with good answers. And it will require, I think, the most important thing which Peace Corps is having kind of written in the inside of the idea, that you actually go there and put your feet into the water and you will be with the people. Because there are kind of, I don't know if I can say it, but two types of foreign help or foreign. I mean, you come in, stay there for 1 day, which I did. You know, I came, stay for 1 day, and then leave and think that you got the message across. You didn't get anything across. I mean, it doesn't work that way, and it's clear from also from the discussions that you have there that we don't know the right answers. I mean, the right answers they are known only by those people who are living there. And the more time you spend with them, the more you try to listen, the more you try to kind of understand what is this about, the better you can help. And I think that is, at least for me, the very important message to any kind of help that comes and wants to help somewhere, that the time spent there is the most important value that you can bring, because you can walk the walk and talk the talk. You can kind of be part of what is actually going on, what is happening, and you can really be much more sensitive and much more understandable of the good answers, which I believe those people have in themselves. The only problem is that right now then they are just kind of wondering, what should we do? And that is happening in each person's life, but it's happening also in the societies. And you could really feel that there. The second experience which I would like to share with you was the kind of security issue. When you are kind of leaving the totalitarian regime, suddenly, you know, and even in Egypt, the police kind of disappeared completely because they were connected with the secret services, and they were suddenly not there. And the response by people was that they built their own voluntary groups which were protecting their own houses, they were protecting their own streets. They kind of took over because the structure couldn't function. And it was their own decision when they decided, okay, we can do this. It was kind of a first step of citizens, or people being there, seeing that this is not working, and starting to believe that, yes, we can do it. Even nobody gave us a permission. And third thing, which is you know, a challenge that it's connected very closely to the Slovakia also. It's when we last Friday we sit down with the Egyptian ambassador in Bratislava, together with Pavel Demeš and Martin Butura, all the names that and other NGO people discussing the situation in the country. And I asked him about the 3 most important issues that he feels need to be helped now, or he feels that they are important for his country. And one of them he named was, and it was a surprise for me, but he said it very openly. We need help from NGOs. We are facing a very difficult situation in the corruption and the transparency issue. Before, it was mostly working just by bribing officials working in the government, and we need an outside player. We need somebody who is coming from outside and kind of putting the mirror across and is helping us to understand that the system needs to change. It needs to work differently. And since Slovakia is in many situations facing very similar problems, and as it was mentioned before also with the mid-year period, when we suddenly, and that is a big temptation also in Egypt, to look for very easy solutions, because when it becomes difficult, when all the expectation goes down and you suddenly don't know all the answers, then people with easy answers are becoming suddenly very popular. And we went through this experience. And actually we had to, and that was a major role done by NGO sector in Slovakia, kind of put it on both sides and decide and explain to everybody in the country, to the citizens that, okay, this is an easy answer, but it will not work. It is too easy that you can actually start to believe in it. And the same is happening also in the corruption issue, or in the things that transparency is becoming kind of a major step that needs to happen in countries in transition, that you have to change and protect the system. You have to speak about the judges, you have to speak about the major components which are controlling the power in the country, and how to set them up right. And that is something what, since the Slovak NGOs, but also the Slovak society went through this experience, can kind of bring to these countries. Because it's not so far away. I mean, it's not, it's 20 years. And it's interesting when I was invited to speak on the 20th anniversary to several communities about the experience in the Velvet Revolution. When you speak to young people, it's very hard to get the message across. I mean, it's already a next generation, and you suddenly feel, okay, how can I explain this? Because that is not something what is easy to explain. But in Egypt, for the first time, I felt, okay, they are getting it, because they just went through it and they feel it. And what the ambassador told me, I didn't know this. In Egypt, 60% of the population is under 30. It's a very young population, and even more importantly, is for the first time that they got credit inside of their culture, inside of the society, for doing the change. Before, that was not part of the culture, that the older people were deciding about what will be next, what will be the most important steps. Right now, it's those young people. And they're asking questions, they're wondering what they should do. And I think what we can bring to them is that we can really kind of spend the time with them to find the answers that will be good for them. Because I think that is the most important part. I mean, we can come there just for visiting and so on, and I'm coming back to the Peace Corps, I really strongly believe that the time spent with somebody and walking with them the road which needs to be taken, that is the effort that we need to do. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Wonderful. So our next panelist is Roger Pataki. Mr. Pataki is Senior Director for Europe at the National Endowment for Democracy, where he has worked for 22 years. And during the 1990s, Roger oversaw NED's programs in Slovakia, and I'm told that he still hopes to run the Kosice
Marathon.
Kosice Marathon one of these days. Are you practicing?
Always training.
Good, that's great. Well, we're looking for that then. You have to let us know. Roger holds a master's in Russian and Eastern European Studies from Yale and occasionally teaches Central European history at Georgetown. He's also proud to say that Sergeant Shriver is his cousin on his non-Polish side. So Mr. Pataki will knit some of these themes together based on what the National Endowment for Democracy has seen and done in promoting volunteerism and advancing civil society and democracy in Slovakia, Central Europe, and beyond. So Mr. Pataki.
Thank you so much. I should start off by explaining perhaps what is the National Endowment for Democracy. In many ways, like the Peace Corps, we're kind of a unique creature, a public-private partnership started by the Reagan administration and the Democrats in Congress to do democracy promotion around the world. We're private, we're independent, but we're funded with taxpayer money. And we work on the non-governmental side of part of the overall U.S. Diplomatic and democracy promotion effort overseas. And Slovakia, for me, was a wonderful experience because I got to be on both sides of the democracy promotion business in the sense, both giving out money. I always say my job is easy because I give money to people with good ideas, but also working with Slovaks then on the other side of the coin on democracy promotion beyond the borders of Slovakia. By the time I got to NED, we had already had free elections in Poland, Hungary. Central Europe seemed to be doing fine except for Slovakia. And so this is really where I cut my teeth in this business and really developed the first close friendships with both Americans working there and Slovaks working to change the system there. And that relationship over the decade led from first helping them to change things in Slovakia, but then working with them to help change things elsewhere, some of the work that Philip's talking about. I'd just like to sort of focus on three different aspects of this work, something I'll call the model, the network, and the success story. And they all are really relevant today. They were relevant 15 years ago when we all started doing this. And I think there are important lessons to be seen there in terms of American-Slovak relations, American NGO, Slovak NGO relations, and now government-to-government work on all of these efforts. First, about the model. When NED started doing this work and started trying to promote the transitions in Central and Eastern Europe at that time, it first of all was a very technical exercise. We started trying to develop ways to do this. We were all very new at it, but it was the first time that public opinion polling was used in these countries to help build democratic coalitions. It was the first time that exit polls came into play in this region. All of these were tools that were used to try to promote free, fair, transparent elections and ultimately democratic transitions. We first did this in Bulgaria and Romania in the early 90s. But Slovakia was a very different story. And as a young person back then, it was for me quite interesting because in Slovakia you saw the marriage of the cool and the hip with all of these very technical, very procedural ways of doing things. I think you're going to hear the story in more detail from others. I won't tell the Slovak story about Rock the Vote and about how this coolness and hipness sort of got injected into the democracy promotion business. I would only say that it took American donors to help make this possible. When Slovaks and their American partners came to us and said, we want to fund a Rock the Vote effort, we want to do street performances, we want to do things that nobody did in Bulgaria and Romania that seemed somewhat out of Greenwich Village or Berkeley rather than Košice and Bratislava. It took American NGOs to be able to say yes to this. This is way before Europe was involved in these efforts. And really, American NGOs were on the cutting edge of helping make this possible. And so you'll hear the story about that a little later, I think. But so to that model of technical procedures got added a very young, hip, new way of looking at get out the vote, voter mobilization, and voter monitoring efforts. And this is something that really carried over after that. the OK98 campaign in Slovakia became a model that was used later on in Croatia in 1999, in Serbia in 2000, in Georgia, Ukraine in 2004, and Georgia a year later. But those efforts couldn't have been possible without the addition of the Slovak sort of coolness to that model. Because what we quickly discovered, and what was different in Slovakia than earlier in Romania and Bulgaria, was that the role that young people were playing in these transitions. We're a nonpartisan organization. We receive support from the left and from the right, and we're only allowed to work with nonpartisan organizations. But it was only in Slovakia that we learned, we came to understand, that if you support young people in these societies, these are the parts of society that are the most pro-Western, the most pro-tolerant, the most pro-democratic. The only problem was that they didn't like politics and they didn't want to vote. And that if you could mobilize these people in a nonpartisan way, without telling them who to vote for or why they should vote, only that they should vote, that they were going to vote for those parts of the political spectrum that wanted to be part of Europe again, that wanted to be part of the West, that stood for the same values that we did. And so we quickly realized after Slovakia that we could support these kind of young, get-out-the-vote programs using non-traditional methods, and that this would result really in strong support for the democratic side of the spectrum without favoring any kind of political orientation or party or candidate. And this was really revolutionary at the time, and it became very important later on as we did this kind of work. That model is something that is still done today, and it's gone now, and it's moved on. I know that OK98 had a website, but back then the internet was in its infancy. Today, new media, guerrilla video, all of these things are a part of the efforts that we use to mobilize young people and societies to turn out and vote. But it really started with Slovakia. So the second part I want to mention is the network. And I've already alluded to that, and Philip has too, is that what we saw work in Slovakia meant that it could work in other places. And it meant that it could work at a very important time too, because the transitions that took place in Central and Eastern Europe after 1989 were of different types. Somebody like Mr. Shevardnadze in Georgia was a post-communist apparatchik nomenclatura type. But Vladimir Mečiar, who we've talked about, was a very different animal. This was somebody who was more in the nationalist vein. Certainly they were part of post-Soviet society there. But they drew on different elements of society. And therefore, we understood that what we did in Slovakia could be used in other places, but it was best done by Slovaks themselves. It did not make sense to use American consultants, European consultants, others to go to try to do these things in these places, but we should use people who've already done that, who already, as Philip says, walk the walk and talk the talk. And so we sent Slovaks to Zagreb in 1999 to train Croats. We sent Slovaks to Serbia to work with Otpor and the other groups there. And they're part of a transnational network today that is really crucial. I was wondering if Sharon Walczyk would be here today. She is somebody very closely connected with studying the transition to Slovakia. But she's publishing a book that's going to come out. I'm just going to quote just one line from the review of it. 6 elections took place from 1998 to 2005, in which authoritarian incumbents, not just post-Soviet, but authoritarian incumbents were defeated. And they conclude in this book, it was also done with Valerie Bunce, that the opposition was victorious because of the hard and creative work of transnational networks composed of local opposition and civil society groups, members of the international democracy assistance community, and graduates of successful electoral challenges. And those transnational networks today are very active, not just in Central and Eastern Europe, not just in places like Iraq and Afghanistan, but as Philip said, now in North Africa. I had the privilege of working with a group that we helped start way back in the mid-1990s, Memo 98. They last year trained Burmese to do the first media monitoring programs in those countries. They've worked all over the world. They are part of the OSCE ODIHR missions that certify elections as being transparent or not. So in other words, the Slovak contribution to these transnational networks are really unique. The last thing I'm going to mention is Slovakia as a success story. Some of the countries were successful out of the box. When you talk about Poland, you talk about the Czech Republic or Hungary for the most part. But Slovakia went through a very difficult challenge throughout the 90s. To go from Mečiar to get back onto the fast track of being in NATO and Europe and being on the accession track to the EU. Today, many of the governments that are in transition find it much easier to look at Slovakia as a success story rather than the Polands or the Czech Republics or the Hungaries, because Slovakia went this extra step. It took one longer push, a decade extra, in which you develop very specific skills with NGOs, with government transitions. When Moldova today looks to how it should make its path to Europe, it doesn't look at Poland or the Czech Republic. It looks at Slovakia because its Voronin was its Mečiar, and that sort of symbol of Slovakia still plays a very important role today. About 25 years ago, NED started funding these cross-border programs that built these transnational networks and started using these success stories. Originally, we did it NGO to NGO, Polish NGOs working in Ukraine. Later on, as I said, Slovak NGOs working in Serbia and elsewhere. Today, we're very proud to say that we do this not only with NGOs in these countries, but also governments. Slovakia going from being a recipient of this kind of aid to being one of our partners that works across borders and other places with this assistance. We look forward to talks with Philip tomorrow about how we can help on what they want to do in Egypt. We're already doing this work with the Poles, with the Czechs, with the Ukrainians and others. I look very much forward to continuing my Slovak experience working now with not only NGOs there, but with the government too. Thank you.
And now our final panelist on panel 1 is Wendy Luers. Ms. Luers is founder and president of the Foundation for Civil Society, a democratization and nonprofit organization. She's also co-founder and co-chair of the Project on Justice in Times of Transition, an independent conflict resolution project working in collaboration with the Institute for Global Leadership at Tufts University. And I gather it started at Harvard and then migrated to Tufts. Is that right?
It started under the FCS, and then it went to Harvard, and then we took it to Tufts.
All right. Ms. Luers was also an international relations consultant for NYC 2012, the New York City bid for the 2012 Olympics, or Summer Games. She's been a journalist with Time Magazine, a commentator for KQED TV, and a lecturer. She was a presidential appointee of President Reagan to the National Council for the Arts from 1988 to 94. Founder and president emerita of Foundation for Art and Preservation in Embassies. And we're very grateful to you, and the embassies around the world has fabulous artwork because of you. She's a member of the Council on Foreign Relations and the Women's Foreign Policy Group. Ms. Luers also serves on the boards of the Freeman Spogli Institute of International Studies at Stanford and the Annenberg School for Communications at the University of Southern California. She's also on the American Board of Advisors of Ditchley UK, the Middle East Children's Foundation, and the World Childhood Foundation founded by Her Majesty Queen Sylvia of Sweden, as well as numerous boards dealing with Central Europe. She's also the vice chair of the Latin American program at Woodrow Wilson Center for Scholars in Washington, D.C. Ms. Luers has been decorated by the Foreign Minister of the Czech Republic and the President of Slovakia. A graduate of Stanford, she is married to Ambassador William H. Luers, former president of the United Nations Association of the United States. They have 6 children and 10 grandchildren, and you are a very busy woman, I have to say. Today, Ms. Luers will analyze the role of the Foundation for Civil Society in helping develop civil society in Slovakia and describe the importance of cooperation between the United States, Slovakia, and the world. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you. Whew, God, when we
It's a
figure it all
long
out,
bio, yeah.
it's a long thing. First of all, it's a wonderful thing to be able to bounce back off of Roger, who was one of the people that funded us. But let me go back to the beginning. Bill and I lived in Prague, Czechoslovakia, from 1983 to 1986. During that period of time, we befriended people like Václav Havel and all of the various people who were signatories and spokesperson for Charter 77, and the independent curators and the historians and the intellectuals.